从修例风波到反国安法，示威情绪源头何在？
The people they used to look down on are doing rather better than they are doing now. So there is an existential crisis.
香港暴乱持续不断，背后真相究竟为何？
Do you really believe there's a foreign training and financing to the protesters in the streets in Hong Kong?
Hong Kong people think about China and about Hong Kong is still very influenced by their history, by a Western paradigm.
风云对话专访英国剑桥大学政治学与国际关系高级研究员马丁·雅克。5月28日，13届全国人大3次会议以高票表决通过全国人民代表大会关于建立健全香港特别行政区维护国家安全的法律制度和执行机制的决定。立法主要针对颠覆政权、分裂国家、恐怖活动和外国干预4大范畴的严重罪行。
赞成2878票，反对1票，弃权6票。通过。
人民大会堂会场内响起经久不息的热烈掌声。
中央出手的法理依据，最基本的是3条：一是国家安全事务本来就是中央统一管理的事务；二是维护国家安全立法本来就属于中央事权；三是任何国家在打击危害国家安全的犯罪方面，都会采取一切管用的措施，毫不手软。
自去年6月修例风波以来，香港的示威抗议与暴力违法乱象持续不断。国家安全立法本是世界各国通例，为何在提倡民主与自由的香港却一再受阻呢？马丁·雅克，英国剑桥大学政治与国际关系学院高级研究员，曾在本世纪初预言了中国的崛起。2009年，他出版了代表作《大国雄心》，成为研究中国的热销书之一。这位来自英国的中国问题专家对刚刚表决通过的港区国安立法会有怎样的解读呢？
Professor Jacques, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
So we see the NPC has passed the Hong Kong security law, and how do you understand the motives of Chinese government of this motion?
But what I think was clear from last year was that there was a kind of law and order problem. Well, there was a law and order problem in Hong Kong, because what we saw, very violent rioting, the destruction, for example, of or the serious damage to, as I understand it, most of the subway stations, the entrances to the subway stations. And, I was passing through Hong Kong in December. Otherwise I wasn't there. But so someone who'd lived for 2.5 years in Hong Kong rather earlier, it was a bit like a battle scene, actually. I mean, getting around Hong Kong was no longer very easy, where once it had been pretty straightforward, like as long as you knew which shopping malls to go through and so on. It was clear to the Chinese government that, first of all, some kind of legislation was necessary. And secondly, the SAR government would never get it through LegCo and so on. Hence, we arrive at the present, whereby the proposal is that the Chinese government will introduce that legislation itself.
But is it really a violation of the one country, two system, the basic law?
No, I don't think so. I mean, of course, there is a view amongst a significant body of people that it is. But I don't think personally, from all points of view, it would be better if it could go in the natural way through LegCo and so on. But under the circumstances, this is not possible. And the reality is, as you can see from the history, that it's not been possible at any point to be able to introduce it in that manner. But, it's impossible. Hong Kong is an autonomous part of China. It is part of China, but it has certain privileges.
Well, regarding this, I have two questions. I mean, do you really think that passing the Hong Kong security law is of vital importance to maintain the one country, two system? Of course, we're talking about the one country parts in this term. And the second is, passing this law sort of raised some concerns regarding Hong Kong's future autonomous status. Do you think they're really necessarily linked together?
Probably. I mean, I think some kind of security legislation is necessary. I mean, at the moment, Hong Kong doesn't have any. And therefore, this leaves a certain law and order problem. which we saw dramatically expressed last year. And maybe I don't think the underlying problems of the attitude of sections of the Hong Kong population have been resolved. And therefore, I think that this kind of problem could get repeated. So I think the thinking is, well, if we introduce this, it will act as a kind of restraining force, if you like, on this kind of extremism. And there's no doubt that the situation has become very serious in Hong Kong. However, having said that, I am not under the illusion that any kind of security legislation will resolve the underlying problems in Hong Kong, which are serious and which the Chinese government will need to address.
Which is?
Why are so many in Hong Kong uncomfortable about the situation? Or that uncomfortable is too mild a word. Why do people feel so strongly about the situation in Hong Kong at the moment? Why are they not happy with the SAR government? Why are they not happy, indeed, with the Chinese government in this context as well? And that seems to me, much deeper question. And, you know...
Yeah, do you have an answer to that?
Well, in my view, I think there are two problems, very crudely speaking. The first is the attitude towards China and the mainland Chinese. Now, this is not a new problem. This is a very old problem. Hong Kong, for a long time, Hong Kong Chinese have looked down on mainlanders. They don't like the mainland. When I was living there, which was 1998 to 2001, really striking, and anyone who lived there could see that, was the level of discriminatory attitudes towards mainland Chinese from the Chinese population. They looked down on them. They thought they were inferior. They thought they were uncouth. They thought they were poor, out of the countryside.
The racism, the discrimination exists everywhere. Do you find it particular in Hong Kong is stronger than anywhere else?
I think when you are dealing with colonies, we're talking about British colonies here, but it's true, a more general feature of European colonialism, you'll find that in those colonies, basically, the currency of governance was racial. 156 years the British ruled for, and only British Caucasians were involved in the governance of the country. Why? Because it was a racialized system. All colonies were racialized systems with a racial hierarchy. And so what was engendered, what was bred in that kind of situation was a very racial mentality, not just amongst the British, because for a long time, they discriminated very, very heavily against the Chinese. But the Chinese, in turn, I think, in Hong Kong, internalized the same kind of attitudes and looked down on anyone they thought was below them. And those that they thought were below them were the mainland Chinese, of which there were small numbers who, sought to live in Hong Kong and so on over time. But also, there were quite a few, not a large number, quite a few Indians. There are migrant workers and so on. And they were, by and large, discriminated against. I know this because my wife was Malaysian and we lived there for a period, and she suffered a lot of discrimination, racial discrimination. This was now 1998 to 2000. So there is a problem, of attitudes. And this has been compounded, actually, in the period since the handover. And what's compounded it is that the people they used to look down on are doing rather better than they are doing now. So there is an existential crisis.
So you think deep down the root of people's frustration in Hong Kong is the identity crisis. They cannot sort of accept the change of the comparative status versus mainland Chinese.
I think you put it very well. I think that that is extremely important and not easy to deal with.
2019年2月，香港特区政府宣布启动逃犯条例修订程序，此决定遭到强烈反对。香港发起了多次大规模反政府示威游行，然而，逐渐的，游行活动从一开始的和平示威演变成严重破坏居民生活安定和破坏社会秩序的暴力行为。
我记得，3天之后，也就是4月1日， 我在香港接受凤凰卫视采访的时候，专门对此讲了一番。至今我仍然认为是义正辞严的话。我说，有人公开成立以港独为宗旨的政党，容不得我的回应有半点含糊。我们不能因为这些人的主观意图不可能得逞，或者说不可能成事儿就姑息。在这些大是大非的原则问题上，一定要讲是非、讲原则、讲底线，绝不能养庸遗患，必须防微杜渐，露头就打，穷追不舍。我讲了这些话之后嘛，事后也有人跟我说我言重了，甚至说这样反而会抬高这帮年轻人。后来我们看到的情形是，多名主张港独本土的新人进入立法会，并上演了一幕幕就职宣誓闹剧。
一个初衷仅仅是向台湾移交杀人犯的修例法案，究竟为何能引发如此巨大动荡？
How about the situation under the ruling of Britain? Was there such a similar law in place? Could the act of secession, subversion, terrorism, and foreign interfering forces be allowed back then?
In a lot of colonies, the British used the Internal Security Act, which was basically like emergency legislation where you could hold people, you could arrest people in a more or less arbitrary way and hold them in jail. This happened in Singapore, it happened in Malaysia, for example. I don't know exactly the details of what happened in Hong Kong, so I'm not going to pretend that I do know them. But certainly there were provisions to deal with law and order, and they would have been very repressive. There was an array of very repressive legislation, and I'd be surprised if it didn't exist in Hong Kong as well. In fact, it clearly did exist, but maybe not as severe as India, for example.
Not only last year and also the riots and demonstrations years before, that there were Hong Kong citizens in the streets or in front of the gate of the consulates, and they're pleading the rescue from countries like UK especially, and waving the Union Jack flags. So I wonder, what would the British public think when seeing this sort of scene?
Well, I suppose one expectation one might have is this kind of sort of almost like patriotism for the empire, as was a last but new gasp of sentiment for the old British colonial master. I'm sure there will be people who in some way or other would respond to that. But I also think there would also have a kind of would look at it askance, because it's like such a blast from the past that it wouldn't exercise a strong political and emotional pull.
You said the protest these days that we saw, people are unhappy with the passing of the Hong Kong security law, and last year we see the protest against the extradition law. There are different causes, but somehow there are similarities in the two cases. So what are the similarities? Can you please elaborate?
Definitely. There is a relationship between them, and the relationship between them is that Hong Kong people, a lot of Hong Kong people, I think we're talking about a majority of the population, don't like the idea of Chinese-inspired security legislation or extension of Chinese legal rights within Hong Kong.
So back to my question, based on what you know and what you saw, do you really believe there's a foreign training and financing to the protesters in the streets in Hong Kong?
I don't think that is the underlying problem. I think the underlying problem is that the way in which Hong Kong people think about China and about Hong Kong is still very influenced by their history, by a Western paradigm. So I think that, and you've got to always also remember that Hong Kong is very open. It's still very open. I think it will probably remain very open, maybe not as open as it's been, but I think it will still remain pretty open. There's a lot of Westerners there, a lot of Western ways of thinking. I mean, in the universities and in the education system, in the schools, in the syllabus and so on, there's still essentially, there's been Western teaching about China, which is wrong. I don't go along with it. But the sort of within Hong Kong is what I'm trying to say, is a very Westernized ways of thinking, institutions which really still think in very Western ways and so on. And so transforming or moving Hong Kong in a significant direction towards a Chinese way of thinking is a very difficult task. And I think it is this cultural problem, this intellectual problem, because it seems to me in the situation that exists in Hong Kong now, they do need some kind of legislation which can handle riots, violence, subversion. You know, they do need, that is necessary. Last year showed that. My worry, my concern is, you know, if that's all there is, then China, it's not going to solve the problem as far as China's concerned, because at the end of the day, China has to win the hearts and minds of the Hong Kong population.
近日，美国非裔男子弗洛伊德惨死事件引发的怒火烧至全美，示威抗议活动仍在持续升级。有评论称，这是自1968年马丁·路德·金遇刺后，美国最大规模的种族暴力事件。据美媒统计，抗议活动爆发不到1周，已有5600人因暴动、盗窃、破坏财物等行为被捕，至少3人死亡。席卷全美的抗议潮愈演愈烈，并且开始向其他国家蔓延，包括英国、德国、丹麦、爱尔兰、澳大利亚、加拿大。一幕幕激烈的暴力冲突场景，难免让人联想到去年夏天那场席卷香港的风暴。
相比之下，不仅中央没有出动军队，驻港部队还主动帮助清扫路障。而美国在短短1周之内，就已经有10余州出动了国民警卫队。
香港自回归以来，全球金融中心的地位没有动摇。不仅如此，金融体系也日趋稳定和成熟。凭借背靠内地得天独厚的优势，香港不仅有效抵御了非典疫情和2次金融危机的冲击，香港的 GDP 也一直保持平稳增长，较回归前上升了超过1倍。与此同时，凭借良好的税收及商业政策环境，香港还连续多年被评为全球最自由的经济体和最具竞争力的地区之一。香港从祖国快速发展和繁荣富强的巨变中获得了机遇和成就。
有人说这次中央采取的是霹雳手段用力很猛，担心国家安全立法会不会把香港管死一国两制的空间会不会因此萎缩或者压缩？正如我前面所说，我认为如果要讲这2者之间有辩证关系的话，这个辩证关系应该是国家安全的底线愈牢，一国两制的空间越大。从经济领域看，可以预见，立法出台之后，香港社会恢复安定，营商环境、投资环境会进一步改善，中央对香港的支持力度肯定会加大，包括大家关心的巩固香港国际金融中心地位的问题，中央也会不遗余力的支持。
In general, how do you find the central government's policies towards Hong Kong in the last 23 years?
Well, you know, I think that they found it very difficult. I think that it was an extraordinary proposal, wasn't it? Well, the problem is the Hong Kong economy was essentially a colonial economy. It was colonial economies are by and large not competitive economies, but they're oligopolistic. They privilege a few tycoons who were chosen originally by the British. And basically, that's not changed in Hong Kong. Property prices in Hong Kong are sky high. Why? It's not because of the density of the population. This is a deceit. Yes, places like Wan Chai are extremely densely populated, but large parts of Hong Kong are very lightly populated, for example, in the New Territories. But the way the supply of land is controlled by the tycoons means that there is a shortage of land for property, but there isn't. They just control the supply of it onto the market because they want to keep the prices so high. Now, what are the Chinese going to do about this? Are they really happy with essentially a still continuing colonial style economy in Hong Kong? And unless they break with that, they're not going to meet the desires and the aspirations and arouse the enthusiasm of the population. Now, the other problem is also a colonial problem. The problem is that basically the nature of administration in Hong Kong continues to be that of a colonial administration. What was the colonial administration? What happened? The key decisions were taken in Britain through the Governor General, who was always British, and then Legco, until relatively recently, before the handover, was still predominantly British orientated in one way or another, and then it began to widen its composition. But basically, the administration is not a political leadership. It's not like a government. It's like a civil service. The nature of governance in Hong Kong is that it is a civil servant administration. That was the legacy of the colonial period for China. And quite frankly, such an administration is incapable of giving proper political leadership. So what is needed? What does China have to do in this situation? It can't just work by the stick, in other words, national security legislation. It also has to offer the carrot. It has to offer to the Hong Kong people a sense of the future, not looking in the rearview mirror constantly. Oh, weren't we great in the past? But where are we going in the future? And this is particularly important amongst the young people, because I read the situation in Hong Kong that a lot of young people don't really think there's much hope for them in Hong Kong. They don't see much hope in terms of the economy, in kind of the jobs, in terms of education, and they can't see hope in the relationship with China and those to the north.
How about now, the future of Hong Kong with America removing its special status? So what would it mean for the future of Hong Kong?
What will it mean for Hong Kong? Well, I think that Hong Kong's prospects as a financial center probably won't be that much affected. I mean, there is a body of opinion, probably a majority of body of opinion in the West, that it will be. But I think you've got to think of Hong Kong as a financial center still in terms of its relationship with China. I mean, why do you go to Hong Kong? Why do you list on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange? Basically, you list on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange either as in terms for better access in various ways to China, or more important, much more important, is Chinese companies listing on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, which of course they do, and they're doing in growing numbers, and this will increase. Why will it increase? Because basically they're being increasingly discriminated against and frozen out of listing on the American stock exchanges, on the New York Stock Exchange. So I think that Hong Kong's relationship with China will, and what's happening in America, will actually, ironically under the circumstances, probably strengthen Hong Kong's position as a financial center. And I think that China's attitude, if it feels more secure in its relationship with Hong Kong because of the introduction of this security legislation, will increase the extent to which the Chinese will look favorably on Hong Kong.
But do you think isn't America aware of that? By removing the special status of Hong Kong will sort of push Hong Kong towards China eventually?
I think there is a clear strategic perspective on the part of the United States towards China. We are witnessing a process of decoupling, of seeking to push China out of various areas and so on. Now, take the attitude, for example, towards Huawei. But is this really in the interests of the United States? I think it's not in the interest of a lot of the technology firms in the United States. So at the heart of it is not a narrow economic calculation. It's about geopolitics. It's about seeking to maintain the United States as the global leader.
Professor Jacques, thank you for being with us today. So you're a senior fellow of the Department of Politics and International Studies of Cambridge. So you had a book.
香港局势正在发生积极而微妙的变化。我坚信，不论接下来香港再发生什么，也不论外面的人怎么说、怎么做，全国人大常委会都将依照法定程序顺利完成有关立法，并且确保在香港特别行政区落地实施。有了这部立法，一国两制在香港的实践就装上了杀毒软件，必定会运行得更安全、更顺畅、更持久。